Busbecq's letter, part 2, Problems of the Succession. Suleiman had a son by a concubine who came from the Crimea. His name was Mustafa, and at the time of which I am speaking, he was young, vigorous, and of high repute as a soldier. But Suleiman had also several other children by a Russian woman. To the latter, he was so much attached that he placed her in the position of wife. Mustafa's high qualities and matured years marked him out to the soldiers who loved him and the people who supported him as the successor of his father, who was now in the decline of life. On the other hand, his stepmother, Roxolana, by throwing the claim of a lawful wife onto the balance, was doing her utmost to counterbalance his personal merits and his rights as eldest son, with a view to obtaining the throne for her own children. In this intrigue, she received the advice and assistance of Rustam, whose fortunes were inseparably linked with hers by his marriage with a daughter she had had by Suleiman. Inasmuch as Rustam was chief wazir, he had no difficulty in influencing his master's mind. The Turks, accordingly, are convinced that it was by the calumnies of Rustam and the spells of Roxolana, who was in ill repute as a practitioner of sorcery, that the Sultan was so estranged from his son as to entertain the design of getting rid of him. A few believe that Mustafa, being aware of the plans, decided to anticipate them, and thus engaged in designs against his father's throne and person. The sons of Turkish sultans are in the most wretched position in the world, for as soon as one of them succeeds his father, the rest are doomed to certain death. The Turk can endure no rival to the throne, and indeed, the conduct of the Janissaries renders it impossible for the new sultan to spare his brothers, for if one of them survives, the Janissaries are forever asking generous favors. If these are refused, the cry is heard, "Long live the brother, God preserve the brother," a tolerably broad hint that they intend to place him on the throne. So that the Turkish sultans are compelled to celebrate their succession by staining their hands with the blood of their nearest relatives. Being at war with Shah Tahmasp, Shah of the Persians, he, Suleiman, had sent Rustam against him as a commander-in-chief of his armies. Just as he was about to enter Persian territory, Rustam suddenly halted and hurried off dispatches to Suleiman, informing him that affairs were in a very critical state, that treason was rife, that the soldiers had been tampered with and cared for no one but Mustafa, and he must come at once if he wished to preserve his throne. Suleiman was seriously alarmed by these dispatches. He immediately hurried to the army, sent a letter to summon Mustafa to his presence, inviting him to clear himself of those crimes of which he was suspected. There was great uneasiness among the soldiers when Mustafa arrived. He was brought to his father's tent, and there everything betokened peace. But there were in the tent certain mutes, strong and sturdy fellows, who had been appointed as his executioners. As soon as he entered the inner tent, they threw themselves upon him and endeavored to put the fatal noose around his neck. Mustafa, being a man of considerable strength, made a stout defense and fought, there being no doubt that if he escaped and threw himself among the Janissaries, the news of this outrage on their beloved prince would cause such pity and indignation that they would not only protect him, but also proclaim him sultan. Suleiman felt how critical the matter was, being only separated by the linen hangings of his tent from the stage on which this tragedy was being enacted. When he found that there was an unexpected delay in the execution of his scheme, he thrust out his head from the chamber of his tent and glared on the mutes with fierce and threatening eyes. At the same time, with signs full of hideous meaning, He sternly rebuked their slackness. Hereon, the mutes, gaining fresh strength from the terror he inspired, threw Mustafa down, got the bowstring round his neck, and strangled him. Shortly afterwards, they laid his body on a rug in front of the tent, that the Janissaries might see the man they had desired as their sultan. Meanwhile, Roxolana, not content with removing Mustafa from her path, did not consider that she and her children were free from danger, so long as his offspring survived. Some pretext, however, she thought necessary in order to furnish a reason for the murder, but this was not hard to find. Information was brought to Suleiman that whenever his grandson appeared in public, the boys of Gemlik, where he was being educated, shouted out, "God save the prince, and may he long survive his father," and that the meaning of these cries was to point him out as his grandsire's future successor and his father's avenger. Moreover, he was bidden to remember that the Janissaries would be sure to support the son of Mustafa, so that the father's death had in no way secured the peace of the throne and realm. Suleiman was easily convinced by these arguments to sign the death warrant of his grandson. He commissioned Ibrahim Pasha to go to the Gemlik with all speed and put the innocent child to death.